Hello and welcome to the IFT show in New Orleans. I'm Elaine Watson, reporting for FoodNavigator-USA. Now, in terms of cardiovascular health, we tend to talk about fats as being good, bad or ugly. So in the good camp, we have poly and monounsaturated fats. In the bad camp, we have saturated fats. And in the ugly camp, we have trans fats, or that's how the story goes. But more recently, there have been several very large observational studies which show that there is in fact no correlation between saturated fat consumption and cardiovascular disease risk. So is it time for a rethink? And has saturated fat been unfairly cast in the role of nutritional bogeyman? Now, to discuss this issue, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr Gerald McNeill, who is Vice President of Research and Development at Loders Croklaan. You're a palm oil expert.
Thank you.
So, can you give us your view on this debate? Now, palm oil is about 50% saturated fat, and we know that that raises LDL cholesterol. So, isn't that a bad thing?
Yeah, if you just look at saturated fat on its own, it does raise LDL cholesterol. I mean, that's true, and a higher level of LDL cholesterol is associated with a higher risk of heart disease. However, palm oil is a natural fat, and it's a blend of different fatty acids. And along with the saturated fat, we have 50% of unsaturated fat. And we constantly hear that we should be consuming more of the unsaturated fat because it reduces risk of heart disease. So logically, if you combine an equal amount of LDL raising and LDL lowering fatty acids together, the likelihood is it's going to cancel out more or less.
Yes.
And looking beyond just the fatty acids themselves, saturated fat actually increases HDL cholesterol.
The good cholesterol.
The good cholesterol,
yes.
yeah. And in fact, nobody seems to be taking that much into an account when we're talking about this issue here. So the increase in HDL, good cholesterol, is higher than any other fatty acid, including monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats.
Yes.
So when you combine those two together, the HDL and the LDL, it comes out to be neutral. So saturated fat, we would predict from that ratio, is neutral.
Yes, okay.
And then we combine the neutral with the beneficial, we are actually getting a small but significant decrease in risk of heart disease by consuming palm oil.
Yes. So would you say, I mean, for example, there was a publication, the Annals of Medicine, there was a paper that was published fairly recently which generated quite a lot of press, which was supporting this hypothesis, and it was a large meta-analysis. Do you think that changed opinions in the industry, and is the conversation now starting to change?
Yeah, I think that the conversation was starting to change even before that, because back about 10 years ago, the first observational study came out looking at the different fatty acids over a 25-year period, and that was the Nurses' Health Study.
Yes.
And that was the first study, I believe, that really showed no link between saturated fat and actual heart disease. We're not talking about markers here, but actual disease. And in fact, the total to HDL cholesterol for saturated fat indicates it would be neutral, and in fact it turns out to be neutral.
Yes.
And then many other similar studies have been published, maybe 20, up to the Chowdhury publication that came out last November. And all of them, without exception, found no link whatsoever between consumption of saturated fat and risk of heart disease.
So as to the conversation, I mean, in the kind of the mass media, if you like, this is starting to get a bit more traction. I'm sure a lot of people saw the cover of Time magazine a week or so ago, which had a butter on the front and was asking about what we think we know about fat and whether it's wrong. What about the policymakers and the opinion formers in the nutrition community? Are they listening to this debate?
Yeah, well, actually, we're here at the IFT 2014, and this morning I heard a presentation by some of those policymakers,
Yes.
and one was saying that, well, there is going to be a moderating effect from all of those combined studies. It's hard to ignore the data by now.
Yeah.
But she thought that it was going to take a long time because it's so deeply embedded in the FDA, the USDA, the American Heart Association. They're very slow-moving, cautious organizations. And I also did see a study where the standard saturated fat is just bad for you.
Yes.
It's still out there, and
Yes.
a lot of that will take time to change.
So as to how policymakers should respond, particularly the Dietary Guidelines Committee, which is deciding what to come out with in 2015, do you think there should be actual policy change in terms of dietary advice as a result of this new science?
Yeah, I think it's extremely important
Yes.
that there should be new advice put out for saturated fat. It's misdirecting a lot of the resources and
Yes.
research money that are urgently needed in other, much more important areas. Like the latest thing now is that we're thinking that sugar might be actually, the main problem. Sugar gets converted into fat in the
Yes.
body. It activates many different kinds of hormones and seems to be related to type 2 diabetes and obesity.
Yes.
So we should be focusing more on that, because saturated fat doesn't really do anything. It's unfortunately been a complete waste of time for the last 25 years.
Well, you heard it here first. It doesn't really do anything. This is Elaine Watson reporting for Food Navigator USA.